Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I feel like all year long, Ohio State fans have enjoyed our Michigan Monday editions of this podcast a lot more than Michigan fans have. I have a feeling that may be reversed today in some ways. I don't know why I would possibly think that, but I just had that sense before we hit record, like, I wonder if this will appeal to different people than a typical episode. Who's to say?
Who is to say? I've had several Michigan fans tweeting at me and in my DMs saying, "Hey, when's Michigan Monday come out?" And I think at around 8 or 9 o'clock this morning, there was somebody adding me saying, "I want it, I need it," and it's like. The thing is, like, I don't always do a Michigan Monday after the game. The point of Michigan Monday is to keep Ohio State fans up to speed on what is going on with Michigan all the way up until the game so that they know what to expect. Well, now they know what to expect. So there's not always a Michigan Monday after the game. Sometimes where things go really poorly for Michigan, maybe it's like, well, you know what, things need to be addressed. I don't know that a Michigan Monday is necessary today, maybe an Ohio State Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that maybe is more of what this show today is about as we look at what this loss means for Ohio State, what they do moving forward, what kind of results will this bring. And Tom, that's why my first question is, does this game have to mean anything for Ohio State? Aren't rivalry games supposed to be toss-ups?
Rivalry games are supposed to be toss-ups. I think the reason that this is consequential for Ohio State is this was not the 2016 Penn State game where it's like, well, there was one blocked punt and then there was one blocked field goal, and that's why they lost. Like, you go through Ohio State's losses in Big Ten play in the last, basically since Urban Meyer got to Columbus, and it's, the weird fluky one, like the Penn State game, where it's like, what are you going to, Ohio State dominated that game and just found a way to lose with a couple stupid special teams plays. I'm not sure that required a complete coaching staff overhaul. You have the weird, just absolute no-shows at Iowa, at Purdue. That's a whole separate kind of conversation. And then you have, the 2015 game against Michigan State was just sort of like, you could chalk some of that up to really crappy weather, and Zeke Elliott had been hurt all week and in the hospital at one point earlier in the week. So you can and so that's why they went away from the running back run a little bit more in that game. So that's a little bit more understandable. This one, like, you can have the, CJ Stroud was sick last week conversation, and sure, that explains some of it. They also got their butts whooped in the trenches on both sides of the ball. That's not something you can overlook. That's not like, well, there was this one crazy punt block or one crazy field goal block, and that completely changed the game. They got their butts whooped in the trenches. And that's when that is, we spent the entire week last week talking about the fact that this is the thing that defines the game every year, this one thing, and they got whooped on both sides of the ball. That's where you start asking some bigger questions about, okay, why did they get whooped? Was it, there was a video of Aiden Hutchinson, I think an NFL draft scout put out, where it was Aiden Hutchinson like bull rushing Thayer Munford, and Thayer Munford fell over. It was like one of those Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. He just went straight through Thayer Munford, and Thayer Munford just went like a big tree falling right down, and just straight down like a tackling dummy. It's like, okay, was that a strength and conditioning issue? Was that a technique issue? What was it that caused that to happen? Because that is not what that's supposed to look like when you are Ohio State. So what caused that, and how do you fix it is kind of, that's the question that's going on. That's one micro example. But boy, you could go through the film and look at a lot of defensive line things where you were asking sort of the same questions on a lot of different plays.
Yeah, that play in particular, you're talking about Aiden Hutchinson versus Thayer Munford, kind of like the scene in Blazing Saddles where they go through the fake town and just start knocking stuff over. And some of what I chalked it up to is Thayer Munford playing guard most of the season and sometimes having to play left tackle. And I think you need much more preparation at left tackle. And granted, he started there forever, but he hasn't been there much this year. You need more than just cursory snaps at left tackle to be ready for Aiden Hutchinson. and he got caught, and you saw the result there. That's why something I wrote, and what I know, what I think, what I wonder is that it might just be better for, say, Nick Petit Frere to go to the NFL. That way, they have a solid five. They know what they're doing. Paris Johnson can move from guard to tackle, and you just have the five. And you're going to have to get the center settled. But I think having so much room to move guys around maybe ended up hurting them a little bit. I think it helped more than it hurt, but I do wonder if it caused some issues here and there. The Oregon game. Well, first you're talking about those outlier, the Purdue Iowa losses under Urban Meyer. I think this is very similar to those, because this was just it was a complete domination from Michigan. Michigan should have probably been up in the 49 range, like Purdue was, and Ohio State's offense being better than the offense in 28. That's why they were at 27 instead of 20. I mean, this is similar to those games, in my opinion, where it was just a little bit out of the blue and they got dominated up front. But also, I don't know how out of the blue it is, because it also happened against Oregon. And so the Oregon game was a wake-up call. They made some changes. I think this game is a wake-up call as well. Changes will be made. I guess my question, Tom, is why is there so much sleeping? If you need so many wake-up calls, why is there so much sleeping? And I wonder, we'll talk about changes coming and potential changes coming. Do you think those changes were coming regardless of what happened in the Michigan game, based on what happened in Oregon, and really not having ever found the kind of fix that had solidified a defense or an offense?
Yeah, I think there was a possibility if things really just kind of stayed as they, you look at their numbers for the first two games of the season against the run, and then you look at the numbers the rest of the season against the run. If they had continued to be pretty good against the run and had been able to limit, if they had been able to put that game on Cade McNamara, I don't think Cade McNamara beats them. I still don't think Cade McNamara beats them. Cade McNamara hit a couple plays, but they won that game because they ran the ball. I don't think, if they were able to stop the run as they had been the previous, 9 games, I think they probably win that game despite all the other stuff that went wrong. And, if you then stop the run against Iowa next week, you're beating Iowa next week, you're getting into the college football playoff and you're playing Cincinnati or Oklahoma State or someone like that who does not have a huge offense. So you're probably controlling them. And then you get to the national championship game against Georgia, and Georgia's not exactly a huge passing team. Maybe you can control the run against Georgia. And, well, now that's not happening. Now, at that point, if you get to the national championship game and you put up a decent fight against Georgia, or you beat Georgia, at that point, sure, maybe you do keep a lot of that defensive coaching staff intact. And Matt Barnes is the guy calling plays on defense next year. With the way it looked on Saturday, now all that's off the table. You've lost your proof of concept on all of that stuff. You probably need to have at least a decent idea what you're doing for next year before the Rose Bowl or whatever the bowl game ends up being. So that's your last taste of of this defensive coaching staff going into that kind of a decision-making process over the next month. And I don't think that's, I think there was a path where that was a viable thing moving forward. Now it looks like that is not a viable path. You may see guys shuffle around a little bit. You may see, a largely different coaching staff on that side of the ball, especially next year. Because I do think there were guys who, there are position groups that have been kind of chronically underperforming this year, and you can, make excuses as to why, but chronically underperforming. This is the second year in a row that the Ohio State defense has cost a national championship caliber Ohio State offense a chance at a national championship. You don't get that many chances at national championships. I don't think Ryan Day is going to have a tremendous amount of patience for the fact that this is now 2 years in a row. He's had a pretty darn good offense, one of the best offenses in the country, and the defense has just face planted. And, that is not something, you don't like seeing people have to lose their jobs. You don't like seeing families uprooted and all that kind of stuff. If you want to play the game at the level and have the paycheck that you get at this level, that's the cost of admission. Like, sorry, you don't get to face plant 2 years in a row and just go, well, give us another try.
Well, like I've said here before, bad offense is a choice, and bad defense is a choice. And to continue to year after year, yeah, I think there are going to be significant changes, and there should be, because you have the recruiting, you have the talent, you figure whoever you bring in will continue to be able to recruit and produce talent. But to just be beaten up front against two teams like Oregon and Michigan, who haven't necessarily beaten everybody up that they've faced, and then for you just to get pushed around both sides of the ball is, and it's not just the Ohio State defense. The Ohio State running game has been lackluster at times this year. Yes, I don't know where they are right now in terms of yards per carry and leading the nation. They were leading the nation up until last week, so that's a credit to them. But when you really needed yards, where were they? And they weren't there for Michigan. And so yeah, I think this is, I don't want to say it's a good thing, because last year they kept the defense benefit of the doubt. It was a COVID year, so they kept the staff. And you know what? We can't put too much of a judgment on the defense and the staff because of during 2020, because it wasn't fair for anybody. So you bring everybody back, you make some assumptions, and Ryan Day even said it after the Oregon game. He made some assumptions and that didn't turn out to be correct. So you make some changes, which they did. The changes coming are going to be vastly different than those where you're just shifting some chairs around, like you're removing people from the rooms. And I will be interested to see what this means, because I could see anybody leaving in terms of defensive staff. I think there's going to be some changes offensively. We know there's reported Kevin Wilson being targeted by Akron. There's always some issues with Greg Studrawa in terms of the production there. I think with the talent they had this year, the offensive line should have been better. And I know we talk about 4 tackles playing on the offensive line. I don't know if I don't know if we blow that up and make more of that than it is, but you would still expect better than what we saw to close out the season in Michigan. And then defensively, I think a new defensive coordinator is coming in, and I believe I said it during our live post game. You may have to figure who you want, and then he's going to want this guy here. He's going to want to do this. He's going to want 3 down linemen instead of 4, or is Day going to be? I want single high. So then you have to go get somebody. Like, enough of this. This is the defense I want. Somebody run it. It's like, you better go get the best guy that runs that to run it. And then, oh, by the way, Tom, you better hope like heck that Josh Proctor is the guy that can run it, because you don't know. And so I think there's a big time gamble in staying with the single high if we're going back to it rather than staying with it. So this is another year where there's going to be a lot riding on Day's decision making in terms of his coaching staff. I think it backfired a little here, as we saw. And then we'll find out even more next year. But I know some Buckeye fans are already like, oh, this is a make or break year for Ryan Day. I don't agree with that, but it's going to be big in terms of the staff that he puts together, because as we know, that can doom a head coach or it can save him.
Yeah. And, there were people calling for Ryan Day's head on Saturday, which is nuts. Like, I mean, you're going to lose to Michigan every once in a while. You're going to look bad every once in a while. It's deeply unfortunate for a head coach when you look bad against Michigan and lose to Michigan in that way, but he's not going to lose. He's not losing his job this year. He's not, unless they completely face plant next year, he's not losing his job next year. But what you get into is, if they don't beat Michigan next year, then you're starting to have hot seat conversations. So if you haven't solved the problem by next year and you lose to Michigan next year, then you start getting into the hot seat conversations in 2023. Well, how many assistant coaches want to go work for a coach where it's like, is this guy going to be here in a year? Like, that's where you start having issues drawing the talent. That's why this is such an important offseason for them, is you got to fix it. You've now had 2 years in a row where the defense has cost you a shot at the national championship. You need to fix it, because you need to fix it now before you get into the year where you're all of a sudden it's like, do people want to come work for you? Right now, I would think Ryan Day will have his choice of just about any defensive coordinator in the country he wants. And you always hear how, Ohio State, needs to have the best of whatever. They need to have the best coaches in the country. That was one of Urban Meyer's things. And then Urban Meyer would, he would say that, and then he'd go out and hire the best man from his wedding, and oh, here's my buddy who I coached with before, and it's like, well,
Tim Beck.
Unless you happen to be friends with all the best coaches in the country, and I find that statistically unlikely, then you actually have to walk that out. Like sometimes your buddy who you worked with before is not actually that great a coach, and sometimes you have to make hard choices, and that I think is where Ryan Day is right now. Like I think that coaching staff. I don't know that everything has been completely smooth all year with that coaching staff, but these are people they've worked with. He's worked with for a couple of years. He's in charge of. When he came in, he made some tough choices and cut Greg Schiano loose, and Alex Grinch, I think, was, you can have the conversation of whether Alex Grinch chose to leave or Alex Grinch read the writing on the wall. But he cut a lot of guys loose when he came in. And then this year after the Oregon game, he made some, you are not going to bring in anyone from the outside in the middle of the season. That's stupid, but you can do what you can to change things as much as you can during the season. And he did that. He has shown the willingness to do that. I'm very interested to see, who does he bring in? Does he bring in someone, I've seen Chris Ash's name bandied about and that kind of stuff. I don't know if you want the guy who was the hot guy 7 years ago. Like, go get the Houston's defensive coordinator. His last name is Belk, which is always hilarious to me because he sounds like he should be coaching in the ACC. But, go get him. Go get the guy from Oklahoma State if he's not going to take a head coaching job. Like, you're Ohio State. Go pay someone $2.5 million. Like, whatever, man. Solve the problem. Like, you have the money. You have the resources that no one else in the country has. You have the talent that very few other teams in the nation have. Solve the problem. This is why you're getting paid a lot of money. Figure it out, man. Go get. I'm interested to have Ross Fulton on later in the week on the Morning Scoop to sort of get his thoughts on what should they do now, because it feels like you are very much in an inflection point here where you're not necessarily tied to anything. So I don't know that I don't know that if I'm Ryan Day, I feel like I should dictate what this defense does, because the defense that you've wanted to run the last 2 years is the reason you haven't won the national championship the last 2 years. So maybe it's time to just kind of go, all right, I'll handle the offense, bring in whoever is going to be the guy who's going to run the defense that I feel is going to be best suited to, handle all of these different challenges, handle the Alabama offense, but also handle the Michigan offense. I feel like Michigan's been overlooked a little bit with this team. We talked about that after the postgame on Saturday, where the posters on the indoor field at the Woody are the big banners they have hung up are the Sugar Bowl win over Clemson, the Sugar Bowl win over Alabama. There's no banners for beating Michigan because it was sort of assumed that you were going to beat Michigan. Well, now that's not a safe assumption anymore. So now you got to go find someone who can stop what Jim Harbaugh is trying to do to you, because they have the talent to it. They just have to actually do it.
Yeah, when you stop treating the game as important as playoff games, even semifinals, like, well, I guess you start losing them. I mean, and I wrote about this, I don't know, after the game at some point. Like, Ryan Day finally tasted a defeat to Michigan, and that's something that every head coach going back to about 1910 has experienced in some form or fashion. And only one head coach has it, and he finished 0-1 against Michigan when they played. So this is, Urban Meyer didn't lose as a head coach. He lost as a graduate assistant. He experienced it. He felt the pain. And now Ryan Day has done the same. And we will see how that motivates them. I keep thinking, and I was, if I do end up writing about it, it's like, what do you like to have some sort of final line to size it all up and to wrap it all up. And I was thinking, this game has awoken a sleeping giant. This result has awoken a sleeping giant, but we won't know which giant until next year's game. Like, did you just wake up Ohio State, or is Michigan the sleeping giant that has been woken up? And I think that will be determined next year. And it's going to be an Ohio State program, Ohio State coaching staff that looks vastly different in my opinion. And Doug Belk is the guy that you're mentioning from Houston. But again, you go get somebody and what do they run, and that's going to dictate who else, I guess, sticks around, or maybe some of the shelves are already pushed aside. I Matt Barnes has a history of also coaching linebackers. I wonder, and we're not trying to fire anybody, but you look at how the linebackers were not great this year. We know Ryan Day likes Matt Barnes. He gave him the play calling duties after that. I don't know if like Matt Barnes moves to a position, and then Parker Fleming, what happens there? I'm not anti having a lone special teams coach. I think there is benefit to that. As you've said many times here, Tom, Ohio State has had the top special teams in the nation, and there's value to that. One of my concerns is, and maybe this is just a Greg Schiano thing. Like, how do you spread out all of these coaches in terms of their positions? And I've seen people say, well, you just have a defensive coordinator that has no position. And that's, you can only have 10 coaches. You don't need a special teams coordinator, but also maybe the defensive coordinator doesn't need to have a position. And I go back to Greg Schiano in 2018, where he had no position to coach. So he just spent all of his time dialing up stuff at Ohio State, didn't have time to practice, run accurately or adequately. And he was just this is not the NFL. And you have to size things down. And you go back to Greg Madison. When he came here, he was so bored, he asked for, can I please have the Sams? Just, can I have something? Like, he had no position. So I wonder if you can even do that nowadays, or if it's a good idea, because I've seen it at Ohio State not be a good idea. And I'm sure it works other places. But if the defense is the end all be all, and it kind of is right now, because the offense you expect will be fine, I guess you got to get as many hands on deck as you can to make sure that this gets done in the exact right way. Because I go back to it, bad defenses are by choice.
Yeah, and again, the personnel is there. If you look at, you look at any talent composite you want to, any recruiting ranking you want to, Ohio State has the personnel to play very, very good defense, assuming it's developed correctly. So again, this goes back to, is it a strength and conditioning issue? Is it a player, development issue in terms of coaching? Is it a scheme issue? And, the tricky thing is it could be more than one of those things. But this is the time when, guess what? You don't have a game to prepare for this week. So you've got plenty of time to think about it. Like, sure, you're out recruiting and all that kind of stuff. You've got time this week to look and really look at everything. Look at the film. What does the film tell you? The eye in the sky never lies, as coaches love to tell you. Look at the film. What does the film tell you the problem is? And then you figure out, okay, how do I solve that problem? And, after a game like that, there are no sacred cows. I think there is no one on that staff who should feel like, well, certainly certainly I must be beyond reproach. There are people who I think, I will pretty much guarantee you that Brian Hartline is doing just fine. Tony Alford is probably doing just fine this week. There are guys who I don't think are in any kind of danger, and their units have performed pretty well. But there are plenty, there's a lot of guys on that team where you could look at them and say, yeah, there's probably room for improvement. And if the standard is this the best in America, or is this at least in the conversation for the best in America? I don't know that they could say that everywhere. I think you look at the recruiting in some spots, you look at the on-field performance in some spots, and it's like, yeah, there is clear and obvious room for improvement here. And can this person deliver that improvement? And, why do I feel they can deliver that improvement? Is it just because I'm friends with them and I like them? Or is it because I feel that they can deliver that improvement? And, every time I post this, people are like, oh, come on, you can't possibly believe that. Day has shown he is willing to cut bait on people and make changes at difficult times when it is not always the easiest thing to do. So I think he's just, he deserves the benefit of the doubt on this. But I think he really needs to, at this point, recognize, like, look, I may not have the absolute best ideas on defense. I'm an offensive coach. I may need to just hire the best possible defensive coordinator and then let him run that stuff. And, Day was in those defensive meeting rooms a lot after Oregon. And then he sort of, weaned himself off of that as the season went along and the results got better. I think you've got to like bring in the dude and just say, here you go. This is your show. And stay on the offensive side of the ball for a little while.
Do you think Jeff Hafley would be willing to leave Boston College to become defensive coordinator, knowing he could land a head coaching job after being Ohio State's defensive coordinator for a second time, Tom?
You know what? I mean, that would be a wonderful thing. I would be very happy to have Jeff Hafley back in our lives, because Jeff Hafley was always one of our favorite interview subjects. And the Boston College thing is not going great for him right now, but it's not, I don't think he's in any danger of getting fired right now. So that's unfortunately for Ryan Day, no. But who you look at Jeff Hafley. What was Jeff Hafley before he came to Ohio State? He was an NFL position coach, right? Secondary coach, right? What was Mike Macdonald before he came? It doesn't have to be Doug Belk. It can be who is the guy. Call your NFL people and say, who is the best up and coming mind on your defensive coaching staff that you think will be a great coordinator? Brian Day has NFL contacts. Get someone else in, bring someone else in, and you are Ohio State. You can pay them a lot of money. And if they don't want to recruit, well, you can pay them a lot of money and you can make them want to recruit. I mean, this is an opportunity, and there is, I think I keep seeing people batting around names like, again, Chris Ash or Brent Pry from Penn State. It's like, I think Brent Pry is more likely to leave Penn State for a head coaching job than he is for a lateral move to a different program in the conference. So
same with Marcus Freeman. Like, you get him for a year,
right? Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. Landing Marcus Freeman would be great, and it would probably help you short term in recruiting. But then he leaves for the head coaching job in Cincinnati in a year when James Franklin leaves Penn State and Luke Fickell goes to Penn State or whatever. I mean, I think you got, and as we saw with Jeff Hafley, there is no guarantee that an NFL coach coming in will stay for longer than a year. That sometimes they leave too, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the names getting bandied around are either just kind of recycled names or names that are not necessarily long-term solutions. And Urban always wanted a 2-year commitment from coaches, and I think you would like to have at least a little bit of consistency on that side of the ball, because you're going to be turning over an awful lot this year. You don't want to kind of be shuffling the deck chairs again 12 months from now, for either good or bad reasons.
Yeah, I keep thinking, like, the irony here is that Kerry Combs may be the safest of the defensive coaches at this point because of what he can do as a position coach and a recruiter. You just don't know if he's going to want to come back after being demoted, if you will. Is he done essentially, basically with Ohio State? We know there are rumblings about, is this Larry Johnson's last year? Will he retire? Al Washington, this was not his best year as Ohio State's linebackers coach. Last year was, I think the linebackers last year were pretty darn good. The Matt Barnes, again, I think he's okay in terms of like safety. I think he's a good young coach, and I think he's okay because he can do multiple things. He's also a special teams guy. So like he could have a role wherever you need him in the back seven and in the special teams unit. Who knows what's going to happen with Parker Fleming? There are going to be some significant changes, and I think there's also a culture thing here. Like, how could this happen? How could you just get beaten up front throughout the entire afternoon by Michigan? There's going to be some reflection there, and that's Mickey Marotti probably will have some reflection there because he's the guy that is supposed to, in the offseason, instill that toughness and build that toughness. He gets the credit. That's where it all comes from. And I'm not going to say this team is soft or anything like that. I'm just talking about the results against Michigan on the line of scrimmage, and they got pushed around. And so there's going to be some reflection there. And how do you keep that from happening again? And is it just from, I'm not going to let it happen, like I'm determined now? And it's going to be, you're going to have to do something different than you have been doing. But now you also have, like, they've got the taste of the blood in their mouths, and they'll realize what they did last time wasn't enough, or they didn't do it correctly, or maybe the players didn't, because just as there are, Ryan Day had never experienced it. I don't know how many people in the actual Ohio State program, like any of them, have experienced a loss to Michigan, and even like assistant staffers, administrative people, a secretary, like as how many, what percentage of these people have experienced a loss to Michigan? 2%, 1%. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's held over from the Luke Fickell era or the Jim Tressel era, I mean, and I can't imagine there's that many because Urban Meyer turned over a lot of people when he came in, and a lot of people have turned over. A lot of those positions have turned over 2-3 times since then. So, I mean, I can't, other than the some of the redcoats who were in there during practices to kind of keep shoo people away. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot of people there who can do that. But I mean, you look at. You don't want to hand wave stuff away and say, well, we're just going to try harder next year. Like that. How many years in a row did Michigan do that? Michigan was always, well, we're going to learn from this. We're going to get better. What actually fixed Michigan? You heard for years, I've made this point before, but I'm sure there are Michigan fans listening to this gleefully for who haven't listened to some of the previous shows. So, hey, remember when Michigan couldn't beat Ohio State? It was all because Ohio State players took classes online, or because Ohio State was a win at all cost program, and Michigan, there was no way Michigan could compete with that. Isn't it weird how when Michigan brought in new coordinators who had new ideas and were maybe a little more energetic and maybe recruited better at certain spots and had better talent in certain spots, isn't it weird how online classes weren't an issue anymore? Kind of makes you wonder if online classes maybe weren't the issue all along. Makes you think, as the kids say. This is Ohio State's opportunity to not just say, well, we're going to do better next year because we're going to do better. Like, well, solve the problem, identify the problems. That's what this week is for. Look at the film, identify the problems, and then solve the problems. That's what you're getting paid for. And I mean, I would be flabbergasted if they just ran it back against next year. That's not what they're going to do. There are going to be changes this month. There are going to be probably substantial changes this month. And they just have to identify the issues, identify solutions, find the best people around. You have the facilities, you have the resources, you have the players. This is a job that is a pretty win-win job for just about anyone to come into. Now you just got to, identify those people. Those people may not all be your friends. Those people may not all be people who are related to people you've coached with before. Those people may not, cast a wide net, talk to some people in the NFL, talk to some people who you may know elsewhere, cast a wide net, find the best people, and then move forward. Like all the pieces are there. They just have to, there are probably some institutional and structural stuff they've got to get straightened out, and then it probably gets fixed relatively quickly.
I think it's going to be addressed relatively quickly. Whether it's fixed or not, I guess we will find out. But yeah, you've seen the problems. You're all professional coaches. It should be easy enough. And it can't just be eventually Ohio State will win again. Like, I don't even think that worked for Michigan. This wasn't eventually. This is Michigan just, punching Ohio State repeatedly in the face. There was no eventually about it. They just went out and beat Ohio State and won this game and took it from them. So Ohio State will have to do that next year. And in Columbus, in front of a more inviting crowd than the one they faced in Michigan and Ann Arbor, which clearly gave them issues, gave them trouble, as we saw with all of the false starts. Tom, anything else? We still have not yet ever gotten to talk about Jim Harbaugh's comments. I guess maybe we can save that for another show entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a whole separate show. The boy, sassy Jim Harbaugh is back, and he's not going to take your guff. And you know what? Great. Good. That's what this is supposed to be about. The sad sack Jim Harbaugh dragging his blanket behind him like Linus is like, we had like 4 years of that. And it's like, that's no fun. Like get sassy, drag people. Like that's what this is for. So good. Talk that ish, as the kids say. And now Ryan Day, he didn't say your name, but you know who he's talking to. So, okay, Ryan Day, here's your chance to answer. Go do it next year. And then guess what you get to say afterwards? Oh, I would never want to say anything impolite or undignified, but I mean, you could argue, Tony, that the Michigan, in case you're wondering, Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh after the game said, I would never, asked about Ohio State players talking trash. He said, well, I want to keep it classy. I don't want to respond. But there are people who, were born on third base and think they've hit a triple. And, it wouldn't be too, that, what, that's funny. Like, that's good. I mean, that is telling Ryan Day, congratulations, you inherited Urban Meyer's program. You haven't done anything yourself yet. Good. That's great. Talk that talk. And then next year, Ryan Day can bring up the fact that Michigan perpetually feels, Michigan hits singles every once in a while and feels like they're on third base. That's like the last 25 years of Michigan football outside of last Saturday. So like, this is what makes it fun. Talk a little bit. You don't have to, we respect the rivalry. Talk a little bit. That's okay. And this is the year Michigan gets to talk. And next year, make sure it's the year that Ohio State gets to talk. That's what you have to do if you're Ryan Day and enjoy it. Like, this is college football. It is supposed to be fun. Like, make it fun. Good. That's what it's supposed to be.
I remember writing years ago that the Big Ten needed another Brett Bielema. Like, he left for Arkansas, and the fun was gone with him. And then shortly after, Michigan hires Jim Harbaugh, and I was thinking, here it is. This is great. This is exactly what the Big Ten needs. And then by the 2017 season, it's just, he's so sad, and it was depressing. And now he is energetic again. We'll attack each day with whatever unknown to mankind. And so he's done that once. So good for him. We'll see if he can keep at it. I'm looking forward to it. Again, we'll talk about that one more down the road, I'm sure, as we figure out what we're going to do without a game in December, like in early December to cover. That's going to be a weird one personally, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. And you guys will be here to listen to all of it, I'm sure. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening as always. And we will talk to you guys later.